Closed captions for this episode of Life in Wilkes is brought to you by Deal Insurance Agency in Wilkesboro, an award-winning, experienced, family-owned and operated agency with service and coverage that goes above and beyond expectations. Join us on a captivating journey as we explore the charm, history, and vibrant culture of Wilkes County. Discover the hidden gems, inspiring stories, and remarkable people that make Wilkes a place worth knowing and celebrating. Join us now and experience the unique essence of Life in Wilkes.
Good morning, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm fine, Carl. Thank you for asking me here today.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Obviously, we have a bit of history, which is appropriate since you are the curator of all of our history. But tell folks who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Jennifer Furr, and I'm the director of the Wilkes Heritage Museum.
That's a lot, right? I mean,
it is. When you think of the museum, we're in the old courthouse, which was built in 1902, but we have two other historic properties that we're caretakers of: the old jail, which was built in 1859, and the Cleveland House, which was built in 1779. So we have a lot under our purview.
That's a lot to take care of.
It is.
And it's also a lot to think about. That's the thing about history that I find fascinating personally. I learned so much from history, not just what happened, but things that we did, things our ancestors done, and what was the outcome of what they did. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot for us to learn from, right?
It is. And when you take segments of history out of context, I don't think people truly understand what they're looking at, because you have to look at the different time periods. The buildings that we take care of, they're coming from three different centuries. So you start with the Cleveland House from the 1700s, and you think about what was going on in this area during the time around the American Revolution and why things were started and the Battle of Kings Mountain. And you look at that in its totality, and the events that took place at that time period kind of lead up to our next time period at the old Wilkes Jail, which was 1859. So you're looking at the 1800s, the time right before the American Civil War, and what's going on in our community at that time in northwestern North Carolina. And then you jump to the 1902 courthouse and what was going on when that building was built at the turn of the century, and new inventions and the political climate and things of that nature. It's before World War I, and, where are we in the world and what's going on here at home. So there's just lots of different aspects.
Frames of reference are important, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
It's not odd today to hear people make all sorts of statements about our past and this being right, this being wrong, and it depends upon who you're listening to. They could be talking about exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. One takes one side, the other side, which is part of history too, right?
That's right. Everybody has an opinion, and sometimes it's very hard to look at history and be unbiased because everybody has their own feelings and emotions going into it and has their own outlook on it.
Right.
So, we try to be unbiased at the museum, and the exhibits that we have, they cover a lot of different territory and different aspects of history and culture, heritage in this area. And you're going to have somebody that comes through that says, well, I don't really like that, but this is fascinating. This is what I like, So more than likely, everybody that comes in, they're going to be able to identify with something that we have.
Do you think it's possible to have any realistic thought process about history and where we came from? In history, I'm talking about those moments. So it's almost like the museum allows us an opportunity, if we'll slow down enough, to step back in time, right?
Absolutely.
And experience that. So is it possible for us to have those experiences of understanding what went on at the Revolutionary War period, what went on during the Civil War, what went on going into a world war, without taking time not only to absorb one exhibit, but then thinking about, and in a museum you can actually see what life was like for people during that time period. I don't think it's possible if we don't slow down. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And and for people to really get that context and see what happens before, during, and after, they really need to take time and study the exhibits, read the text labels, and hopefully spark some conversations and maybe even delve a little deeper after their visit to the museum and do more research.
That's the key, right?
Yes.
Something to spark your curiosity, and then you go off and you learn even more about that one particular thing.
Yes, and I do that myself when I go to other museums, although my husband and I, we look at it from two different perspectives. He teaches social studies at high school level. We met in a history class at ASU, so we're both history nerds. But when he's going into a museum, he looks at it as a history teacher, and he reads every text panel and looks at every object. And I go in there more as a museum director, and I look at, well, how did they design this?
Right.
How was it put together?
Right.
What about the lighting? And, I sort of go behind the cases when nobody's looking and say, well, how was that built? How can we recreate that? I really like that. So, for us, we have two different perspectives. I want to know why they have that object on display, why is it important, and how do they display it? And he's just reading absolutely everything. So when our visitors come in, they all have different things that they're interested in, different levels of, historical context on their own. And like I said, we just want to spark some conversations and hit a nerve. And a lot of times, a lot of people are coming to Wilkes County because they have some Wilkes County roots and they want to know more about their families, what they did here, their community life. And we also have a part-time historic researcher. And he does a fantastic job. Jason Duncan is his name, in helping people with their research.
The map guy,
yes.
The map
and he
guy,
does deed research and, we have cemetery records and things like that. And people who are coming through, maybe visiting from out of town, they had a family member that lived here, they may see their great-great-grandma's picture hanging in the museum and want to know more about that. So
I think as I'm listening to what you're saying now and describing this, and as I close my eyes in my head and just listen to what you were saying, I couldn't help but to think there's a bit of theater involved with this, because you have to put the show on, right?
So to speak,
you have to. You described it. You've got to think about the staging of the exhibits, the lighting. So the feel of the museum is important, isn't it?
Absolutely. We want people to have a good first impression when they come in. First of all, we want it to be clean, and we want it to be very orderly. I don't want it to be chaotic. A lot of times when people think of a small town museum, they may think of like an antique store, and things are kind of jumbled together.
Right.
I don't do well in chaos. I like things to be kind of ordered and laid out in a very precise manner with clear labels and text so that people get something from what they're looking at. Sometimes you have sensory overload and you've got too much going on. And if you tend to focus on one particular object and tell its story, it can lead into the next object.
Right. So it is theater. I mean, in the sense that you're setting that mood, you're setting the tone so that it's easier for us to slow down, right?
And we're telling a story.
Yes.
For the main things that we like to say we focus on is like heritage, culture, the history, and music. And so when people come into the museum, if you're a family of 4 coming through, the museum itself can be self-guided. We give them a map. We show them kind of what direction to start in, to give them some chronological order and see different aspects, an overview of Wilkes County in northwestern North Carolina. And then we give guided tours of the old jail and the Cleveland House. So our tour guides, in a sense, they're storytellers. They tell the history and the heritage of the area. So you get more of a one-on-one experience, that personal touch.
I can't help but to imagine that you also are in a unique position, because when you go to the museum curator, director conferences, what do they call those?
Museum conferences.
Okay, so museum conferences. And you know what you've got. You know you've got this fantastic old building. You've got enormous amount of history going back to the founding of our nation. Do you walk with a sense of pride of like, yeah, I think we got this?
I might be guilty of that.
But that's good though, right?
Yes. Well, being the director, you are the communicator to the public of what you have. It's part of my job and my responsibilities to let people know what we have and to toot our horn, so to speak.
Right. Right.
So I think what we have is very special.
And it's real.
And it's real.
I think that's the thing. Being at the conferences, that's good fun. I can already tell. But share one of the memories that you have. You can go back in time. Doesn't have to be, this year. But share a memory of where Wilkes County, you were able to really let Wilkes County shine because you have everything pulled together, or that's your ongoing process. Share one of those moments of what you were able to share at one of the conferences and how people responded.
Well, I have been at the museum, and I started when I was very young. It'll be 20 years in September.
Oh, congratulations.
My office was located in the old jail because we were still renovating the old courthouse and getting ready to turn it into a museum.
They didn't want you to run away.
I know they had me in the discipline cell, if you can believe that. So at an early North Carolina Museums Council conference, I was asked, along with two of my fellow staff members, to present what it was like to start a museum. I mean, that is something that not every museum director can say. I've been there since we opened in November of 2005, since day one.
Wow.
And I have had a wonderful team to work with over the last 20 years. People come and go, and, just looking at the amount of talent, the mentorship that I have had, because I was relatively young when I started this job and its evolution. So we were able to present at a conference that process, the different subcommittees that we had and how we got everything organized and the route of the museum and all the exhibits and how the displays themselves were centered around what we already had.
Wow.
And over time, we've been able to add to that experience for people.
So when was this presentation?
This was probably in 2006.
So we're still talking early in the game.
Early. We've only been open maybe 6 months.
Wow.
Yes.
So when you come back from the conference and then you're telling people in the community what happened and the experience, what was that response like?
Well, I think there's a sense of pride because, not every community has a museum and not every museum is the caliber that ours is. And I think that's something that we can have a lot of pride in. It is a centerpiece. In my opinion, humbly.
Yes. Well, it is a centerpiece. It's right there in the middle. I mean, Wilkesboro, of course, is the county seat, right? So that's where it would have originally started. So many people, and this goes back to a little folklore. I mean, this has been summer performance season. So the Tom Dooley, a Wilkes County legend, was just performed, and the number of people who think that Tom Dooley was hanged on the tree beside the old Wilkes Courthouse is not a small number, is it?
No, actually, one of the first school group tours I took when I came here, I had done a ton of research because I'm not from Wilkes County, so I wanted to learn everything that I possibly could. So my first winter here, I was pulling books off the shelf and I read cover to cover a lot of the history books based on this area and learned a lot about the Tom Dooley story. And when I was it was, I think, a bunch of third graders that came through, and we were upstairs in the old jail in the Tom Dooley cell, and I was telling them about this and how he was taken to Statesville, and he was tried there and sentenced to die by hanging, and that's where they did his execution. Well, I had a phone call that afternoon from a dad so mad at me because I'm like, how dare you tell my child this lie that Tom Dooley wasn't hanged on the Tory Oak? I said, well, sir, he wasn't.
Right.
It's fact. And I told him my sources, and, he says, oh, okay, sorry, bye. And he hung up. So our point is that we just want to tell the truth.
Right.
What really happened. And as we learn more stories about things that happened in Wilkes County, we add that to the collection of our tour script, and it's always evolving and changing. And, people bring in new artifacts all of the time that tell a different side of a story or enhance some of the things that we already have. And so it's good to keep up to date with those things.
And that's important.
It is. And one thing I always tell my tour guides when they're giving a tour, if somebody asks them a question that they don't know the answer to, say that. Don't make up an answer.
Right.
You know, you don't want to give them a false impression. They say, you know, that's a really good question. I'm not sure of the answer, but I'll go find out. Because we have a great resource of books and research at the museum that we can find the answer.
Sure. I would imagine that's exactly how the story of the Troy Oak being the ending the ending of Tom Dooley was, or Dula, was just because it was local lore. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
It's a good story.
No, that's right. And
It's a good story. It's entertaining.
So that's exactly it. But the play, of course, certainly gets it correct.
Yes.
In the telling of that story. Are there other stories like that? In other words, folklore, things that people come to the museum and they're trying to, get some details on something that is in that same vein that's just not accurate. They're looking for something that really didn't happen the way they think that it happened.
There's probably many different things that, people have formed their own opinion of. And when they come through and they see our exhibits and go on the tour, they come out of it with a better understanding of what truly happened.
I would imagine a lot of people are surprised about the Native American presence in this area. And when our country was being formed, it wasn't necessarily a place void of humanity.
No. They left their mark here. We have a whole exhibit on Native Americans in the museum and a whole case full of things that they left behind, pieces of their culture, pieces of their everyday life. And that's one of the things that we try to show people. And with our text panels and the stories that we have for people to learn about, if you can imagine, this area was full of life before European settlers came here.
Right.
It wasn't all, pristine and new and untouched. They had left their mark.
So if we take a moment and just relax and think and really look at that history trail, then it helps us also in our thoughts about humanity, right? To me, that's one of the most fascinating studies that there is study of the humanities, because we're just not alone. We're not in a situation where it's a single thought or a single way of being. There are lots of ways of being. What's the power of that in just discovering the truth about history? That's a funny word to use, isn't it? The truth about
history.
Right. The truth about history, because there's we feel like it's truthful, but saying it that way, sometimes it's used as a weapon, right? It's used as, the truth is this or the truth is that, and trying to prove a point that somebody's impassioned about. But history is more gentle than that. I'm not talking about what happened, but it's easier than a fight. Right?
Well, I think that's why it's important to look at multiple sources when you're studying history.
Right.
Because like you said, everybody has their own opinion and they're going to put those emotions into what they write about. So it's better if you look at, say, 3 or 4 different texts, even primary sources, journals, things of that nature, and get other people's perspectives, because they're going to have a different skew on the story. You can take Tom Dooley, for instance. People in the community, they may have seen him as this poor kid who didn't have a good upbringing, and so it was inevitable that, he killed someone and went to prison and died and all this kind of stuff. But then, you can look at it as a more humanitarian aspect, is that he didn't have really good role models. He couldn't help his actions, or, everybody can take a different viewpoint.
Right.
But it's better for you to look at multiple sources and get a larger purview of what was actually going on and actually what was going on in that time period as well, outside of this area, and what the influences were.
It frames everything.
It does.
Right. Do you ever get bored with what you do?
No, I don't have time to get bored. We're always going off on different directions, and every day is different. And so it's fascinating. When you have a small museum like ours, we have 2 full-time and 2 part-time people. And so we all wear different hats, and we do different things. We give tours, we work in the gift shop, we do research, we develop exhibits, we write grants, we put on programs. There's so much to do.
You have volunteers as well, right?
I have a wonderful group of volunteers, and we're all always looking for more, hint,
Right.
hint, that help with day-to-day operations. It's always good to have a happy, smiling face when people walk through that door to greet them and say, hi, welcome to the Wilkes Heritage Museum. We'd love for you to take a tour today. Let me tell you what we have going on. Right. Just answering the phones or helping with some of the events that we have going on. It's crucial when you have a small staff to have a dedicated volunteer staff as well.
Well, it makes it more a product of the community, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Right.
You put yourself in there.
There's a thing that we've started years ago, and I made notes and I put it on my wall, and it was that big question of every story we do, we try to answer a very simple question: who cares? Mm-hmm. Not in a flippant kind of a way,
right.
but like, who really cares about mm-hmm. this? If only 4 people care, well, that may not be the best use of our time.
Right.
But if it's a much larger audience and we can do a good job at it, then we're like, okay, that's a mm-hmm. good approach, right? Let's take a look and learn something ourselves. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the museum, it's that notion of, okay, we've got history going on, and now you have activities as well. Mm-hmm. You're always doing something. Talk about those things.
We have a lot of things going on. Since Jason has come on board as our part-time research historian, he's developed a whole series of programs that he gives to engage people at the museum. Mm-hmm. And they just range from deeds and tax records to genealogy. His next program is going to come up next Tuesday, August 13th, and he's collected a lot of information on the Poors Knob community. So he's called it a Poors Knob genealogy swap meet. And we have scrapbooks and photographs and newspaper articles and all of these things because, there's a large population around Poors Knob and there's an interest there. He's had lots of people calling, wanting help in research and their families that come from this area. And so he's put together sort of a swap meet. So others mm-hmm. can come to the museum, they bring their research, and they have a time in the auditorium to talk about the research. They can exchange information and download files and all of this kind of stuff, and then they can tour the museum.
Oh, great. So is that an opportunity to where Jason's going to be able to then pull all of that shared resource together and put it in a master file?
Yes, absolutely. And he's also working on digitizing our photographs. We have people mm-hmm. from all over that are researching different subject matters. Mm-hmm. With the increase with North Wilkesboro Speedway, we've had a lot of people doing articles and things like that on the Speedway, and they want pictures. And so he's scanning and digitizing all of our photographs so we can just type in a key search word and it'll populate the pictures that go along with that key word. Sure. And it makes it so much easier for the people who are coming in to do research.
Well, that's interesting because in that particular scenario, as I understand it, that your building, your museum, is right beside Dooley's, mm-hmm. which was had different lives, right? Mm-hmm. A hotel,
Smithy Hotel, department store, and now it is what it is now. But there's a story about upstairs, right? Yes.
And the beginning of racing in this area, and the start of NASCAR.
Mm-hmm. And it's all, centered right here. And that's another thing that we want people to know, that, we're not just Wilkesboro history, we're Wilkes County and northwestern North Carolina history, because mm-hmm. it's all interconnected and tied together. By
being a county that has the largest landmass, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To think of Wilkes County as if it's limited to the borders of its landmass, that'd be the wrong way to think, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Because, a lot of our surrounding counties, they were formed out of Wilkes. Right. It was much larger than it is now. We have the logo Great State of Wilkes, mm-hmm. So it crossed into Tennessee and Wilkes itself was cut out of Surry County, which was part of Rowan County. And, as time changed and borders changed, we were kind of cut down a little bit, but within our borders, we have so much history here. You think about the starting of Lowe's companies. You have Carolina Mirror, Gardner Glass. You have Samaritan's Purse that's located here now. You have Holly Farms that's now Tyson. We have a lot of industry giants that have started here.
And all of those you just mentioned are international.
They are all international, yes. It all started here in Wilkes County.
That says something about the people, right?
It does. Their ingenuity, their ability to adapt with the times and to look beyond what's in front of their face, to kind of look at the future.
Don't you feel that spirit and that mindset is still alive?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whenever you're rejuvenating something like the Speedway, you're bringing it back to life. You're bringing people here. You're bringing back memories and emotions. People who grew up here, they grew up going to the Speedway and everything that goes along with it.
And you're thinking about, so you have that aspect of it with the Speedway, but there's another thing that's talked about a lot, and I think it's tied directly to what you do as well, and that's the great outdoors.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when we look at the story of Daniel Boone, and we look at the story of our great mountains, and just the region that I think that might be a big reason that a lot of people like to come here, right?
Well, yes. Well, one of the main reasons people settled in this area is because we had great natural resources. We have tons of fertile land. We have great water sources. You know, we had everything here that would make a thriving community. And that's what people were looking for.
Right. We did have then, and we do have now.
We do.
Yes. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, when you look at it during the time of the American Revolution, Wilkes County was the western frontier. It took people like Daniel Boone to cross over the Appalachian Mountains and to go further west and do exploring. But a lot of people, this was new territory to them, even though Native Americans had been here for centuries before. You know, when the early European settlers came here, they just saw it as kind of like a virgin territory.
Right. Wow. Well, it's not that anymore.
No, it's not. But it's still so beautiful.
It is.
And like you said, we have so many great natural resources. We have outdoor recreation, and it's all interconnected. You look at the Greenway and how it's part of the Over Mountain Victory Trail, which is part of the National Park Service. That runs right along the side of the museum, and it ties in with our Cleveland cabin because Captain Robert Cleveland, he went with his brother Colonel Ben down to Kings Mountain and fought in that battle. And so it's all interconnected.
Right. What a great job you have, Jennifer.
It does have its moments.
Yes, that's a great thing. Well, just before we go, and we'll be back because we're not limited to just this one visit. We'll visit again later in the year because we'll have to check on you at least in October sometime because you have those ghosts that show up over there.
Yes.
So tell us what you've got real quick coming up.
Well, tomorrow night, we are hosting author Ron Rash and his new book, The Caretaker. Ron grew up in the Watauga County area, and his book, The Caretaker, it takes place in Watauga, the Blowing Rock area, and Ron is a professor at Western Carolina.
Right.
So he's going to be at the museum tomorrow night at 6 o'clock.
And a prolific writer.
Exactly,
yes. That's fantastic. But he's been here before.
He's never been to the museum before.
Okay.
This is his first visit to us. So we're very excited to host him.
All right.
And then, as I mentioned, next Tuesday, August 13th, Jason will spearhead a Pores Knob genealogy swap meet. And that's going to be in the auditorium, and it's going to start around noon on next Tuesday. And then we already have our ghost tours going on. We do them once a month, May through October. We actually put in a second one in October, and those are by reservation. We have like 15 people per tour, and that makes it a little more manageable. Some of our rooms are small, and those are prepaid reservations.
Right.
And then we'll also have a few other authors coming this fall. Marian Deerhake, she's done a story on Jane Pratt, who was the first congresswoman in North Carolina, and she had a role to play in getting Kerscott Dam and Reservoir built.
Ah, that's wonderful.
And she'll be here in September. And then in October, Lane Dyer, who grew up here in Wilkes County, he has a new book on the Tory Oak, and he'll be coming to present the Tory Oak in October.
Oh, my goodness. We'll have to get him in. He can set the record straight yet again about Tom Dooley.
Yes.
He didn't mean it. Okay, one quick question before I let you go. So with all these ghost tours, because they've been going on for years,
They have, since about 2005.
All right. So just on a professional / personal level, have you sensed, have you seen, have you experienced?
Well, my husband likes to tell people I just have an overactive imagination. But as I said, when I first started working, we were still renovating the old courthouse, so my office was in the old jail. And I would hear lots of creaks and groans and doors opening, and I would be the only one there.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, Jennifer Furr, I think that the hallmark of any great museum director is having an overactive imagination. I think your husband may be right, and I think that's just fine. That's just fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Great to see you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you for spending time with us on Life in Wilkes. We value you as a viewer and appreciate when you share the show with your friends and family. Be sure to bookmark our channel and join us again on the next episode of Life in Wilkes.